Hey guys, and welcome back to another chapter, chapter 6 from the story West on Mars. Let's get into it. Mars was a wild frontier planet then, where violence was not out of the ordinary. The spirit of the adventurer and the pioneer pervaded it, as it does the outer moons today. But the frontier has its own code, which makes it safer sometimes than the steel and stone jungles of civilization. I had what I wanted now, riches. I had no desire to be forced to leave Mars too. There was no more gambling for me, no more living on the edge of the law. I bought into several respectable business ventures, content to add to my wealth slowly. Dory and I built a home in Surtees near Mars City and lived a quiet life together. Mars at that time was a man's world. It lacked divorce laws and similar legal and social machinery for terminating unsuccessful marriages. I doubt that Dory, being what she was, would have taken advantage of such avenues anyhow. She was a good wife to me. She lacked only that former breathless adoration which had meant so little to me. A few years after we arrived on Mars, we were invited to a week-long house party at the home of a business acquaintance, Leswell O'Don. O'Don's wealth was comparable to my own, and he lived here in the lowland of Lacus Lucrinus. These house parties are not as common now as they were in the old days. At that time, they were the major social activity of the rural dwellers of Mars. One invited one's friend for a week at his private dome in the lowlands, maybe 20 or 40 at once. Then for a year or two he could expect to be a guest at the similar parties every month or so, scattered all over the inhabited area of Mars. That's why the old homes of the wealthy out in the lowlands are so big. O'Don didn't live in West on Mars. I built it later. He had a square, sprawling chunk of buildings under a dome out in the center of the Lacus Lucrinus lowland. It was a crude display of raw wealth in execrable taste, with 14th century tapestries and neo-modern furniture mixed up in rooms which might be of Egypto-Cretan architecture. I saw nothing he owned to excite my envy, until on a sage-jumping jaunt across the lowland, the second day of our visit, I climbed the western cliff and saw the desert. Bleak, lonely beauty has a strong appeal for me, Mr. Peachy. Perhaps it is because it strikes a chord in the bleakness and loneliness of my own heart, but I never had seen anything before, and I never have seen anything since to match the stark beauty of those buttes in the Aeolia desert, as seen from the western cliffs of Lacus Lucrinus. It was then that the conception of West on Mars, as it could be and should be, sprang full-blown to my mind. I tell you, Mr. Peachy, I saw this place then in my imagination, just as it is today, with this tower and this great window that overlooks the desert. I had to have Lacus Lucrinus, and Leswell O'Don owned it. When I got back to the dome, I tried to buy the lowland from him. He laughed and named a price that was beyond even my means. It was not that he was particularly fond of the place, he just didn't care to sell. I studied the man for the weakness that would give me what I wanted. He was a big man, a boisterous man who loved action and talk. He was younger than me and handsome, with the rich good looks inherited from his black Irish ancestors. One thing I noted and filed in my mind in case it should prove valuable. He liked Dory. He was a bachelor, as were most of his guests, for women were scarce on Mars then. He knew she was my wife, but he couldn't keep his eyes from her. I think perhaps it was the appeal to such a man as O'Don, of that childish wistfulness and helplessness in her, which I have described to you. What gave me my lead was seeing him play roulette that evening. The sparkle of the born gambler shone in his eyes, and he pushed the stakes up and up, much too high for a sociable game. At that moment, I decided to break my resolution not to gamble on Mars. So guys, that was the end of chapter 6. I hope you enjoyed it, and stay tuned for the next video where I'm going to read chapter 7. So thank you so much for listening. Bye. Hey guys,